then we'll enter in a part of the event with a more technical specifications, where we're going to provide you already some preliminary information regarding local digital twins toolbox, also the main scenarios that we are now evaluating to have in mind and maintain a sustainable toolbox, and also to provide you a high-level discussion in terms of roadmap to deploy the toolbox, and we'll finish with a wrap-up at the end of the session. So, Pepe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ines. Welcome all. My name is José Luis Fernández Villacañas. I work in the European Commission in a unit which function is basically to help cities and technology providers in Europe to uptake digital solutions for basically local services, okay, for improving the lives of the citizens and to help these cities being greener every single time. We have 3 lines of action, basically, in our unit. The first one is encourage the development of data spaces at local level, at city level, or at regional level. Okay. Then we have our favorite digital tool, which is the topic of today's meeting, which is the local digital twins. And then thirdly, we have the Cityverse, which is VR, AR, in general, extended reality, imprinted upon the local digital twins, okay, to facilitate the interaction with the citizens and the local digital twins, okay. The subject of today's meeting is this local digital twins toolbox, and I will explain a little bit where this idea comes from. We want to develop a set of tools that will help cities uptake this local digital twin technology all over Europe. This has been done through a procurement set of actions. There are certain lots, we call them lots, that will help starting cities, starting to develop or thinking about the local digital twins. Then a second category of cities that are those ones that have already some data, what we call an urban data platform, and that want to start getting interested in doing some kind of simulations, okay, like the pre-seed of a local digital twin. And then those advanced cities that have already got a reasonable local digital twin. This local digital twin toolbox, specifically, as I said, for today's meeting, will try to help these advanced cities that already have a local digital twin. Okay, but please don't feel excluded. Don't leave the meeting right now if you are not one of these cities, because there are lots of opportunities also for those starting cities. But the tools, the tool set that we want to develop, the software tool set that we want to develop, which is the objective of this meeting, is for the advanced tools that will complement these local digital twins. Okay. We launched this contract, and you will see briefly later a little bit of the description of the project. And the idea was that they would come up with the technical specifications of these tools for a later project to develop with the help of the technical specifications, these tools, and to form eventually the local digital twin toolbox. Okay. You are here as cities, as policymakers, some of us, as technology providers, as university, in general, as people interested in local digital twins. I welcome you all, and I hope that you can benefit and take advantage of what is being discussed today. I encourage you to participate as much as possible, because the success of this initiative depends on you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pepe. I will take over from here. I'm also going to share my screen. Okay, before we start with the more technicalities in terms of the project and the stage where we are, we just wanted first to say that this is a team effort that we are doing here, and our most priority was really to bring the best expertise to the table and to support us and to help us during this journey. That's why we have different companies in the consortium that are representative of consultancy. We have the network, and also we have research organizations and the academia with us. So our best interest is really to bring the best output possible from this stage of the project. Also very important to mention is that this interim report is happening at this moment, not to share with you already conclusions, but to share gatherings that we were able to get in the previous months. That were a result of the consultation and co-design with stakeholders, also the result of the local digital twins market and analysis, and the starting of the work on possible scenarios that we're going to use to deploy the toolboxes, and we started already on the refinements of the building blocks. Again, this is a point where we are in an interim moment where it's still possible to collect your feedback, and that's why your participation is so important at this moment, for us to be still on time, to have your inputs and to take it in consideration until the end of the project that will happen in middle August. Pepe already shared our satisfaction to have different layers in the ecosystem with us. Of course, the smart cities and communities that are that have heavy presence in this event, but also thank you for the network, also for the national and regional authorities, also the research and the innovation ecosystem, technical and developers, providers, and of course the standardization bodies. Thank you very much to be with us and to be part of this journey. Our main objective in terms of local digital toolbox, and when we start to work on the project, it was very important for us to understand what is the aim of this project, what are the main objectives that we want to take out of this project. And first of all, it's very important to have a solution that is interoperable in terms of digital solutions. Also, it's extremely important to avoid vendor lock in technology and fragmentation. And it's important to take in consideration the different levels of maturity that the EU have at this moment and what we want to achieve in the future. Taking these main objectives in consideration in mind, we really asked ourselves, what should local digital twin toolbox have? And we really believe that we need to have a solution where it will be possible to make the reusable of tools, really work with reference architectures, because there's already a lot of work done that we can leverage on, and really to work in an open standards and having technical specifications for the local digital twins that will serve in a future purpose. Also, the way we think that it's better to have a deployment of the toolbox itself is, of course, to be MIM compliant, economic sustainability, and of course, something that can be maintained and upgrades over the time. So these are really our main objectives and our main guidelines, big thoughts in terms of the projects and how we think it's better to move forward. I will pass now the word to my colleagues, Carlo from Intelera and Philippe from IMEC, where we'll guide you and we'll have a deep dive in terms of building blocks and the architectural part.
Thank you, Ines. I will also share my screen. There it is. So also from our side, thank you so much for being here. And what should be in a local digital twins toolbox? That's the big question that we will try to answer today with your help. And here on the right hand side, you can see already a small figure. Don't worry about reading that. Don't worry about reading all those boxes that are in there. The idea is just to give you a sort of a preview of all the possible tools that we've come up with and that we will be looking at together today. Indeed, that's the way we will go about it. We will show you and discuss these various tools, these various building blocks, and we will ask for your help. So it will really be an interactive session. We will ask for your help to rank them and tell us, in other words, how important they would be for cities, for smart communities, to build, set up, implement, and run local digital twins. How did we come up with all these possible tools and building blocks? Well, we ran large-scale consultation over the past weeks and the past months. We conducted 19 interviews with the stakeholders all over Europe. We also collected 77 survey replies. Many of these were from smart cities and communities. These would be the green pins that you see on the map, but also many from technology providers. These are the yellow ones, and from standardization bodies. So in addition to all of these consultation, we also took part in many events. 4 in particular, they were very, very helpful for us to meet with a large number of stakeholders all in one place. And we also made sure to leverage as much as possible on existing groups, relevant groups and fora, like, for instance, well, the OASC network, of course, but also Eurocities, eClay, Living in EU. And I was glad to see that, many representatives of these groups are also sitting at the table here today. So that's one more great opportunity to validate and discuss the preliminary results that we've come up with so far. And we've identified different types of tools that could be in the toolbox, of building blocks. First of all, and this would be the big circle that you see in the middle, we have the technical tools, the technical building blocks. These are, of course, very, very important. And we will devote the majority of today's session to discussing that. But in addition to the technical building blocks, like, for instance, the software components, we've also identified some strategic tools and also some legal and policy tools and guidelines. So this is just to give you, let's say, a bird's eye overview of the different components that we will be tackling. So without further ado, I would like to jump into the technical building blocks. And for this part, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Philippe. So Philippe, over to you.
Thank you, Carlo. Yes, before diving into the technical details, we would like to shed some light on how we perceive digital twins in terms of their technical complexity. And for this, we have identified some ambition levels. And these ambition levels really reflect, at the one side, different stages of development of a local digital twin, but also what you really want to do with it, what your ambition level is. In the first ambition level, I want to point out that these ambition levels are incremental. Yeah, so whatever is in ambition level 1 is also in ambition level 2, and so on. So the first level is where you typically start out. It's an awareness digital twin where you have an explorative visualization, typically where you can select some layers, some data layers. Perhaps there's also some sensor data in there. And it's quite limited in terms of what it needs for your capabilities to manage data. And it can be used for creating situational awareness in terms of whatever domain you're looking at, whether this is traffic, logistics, environmental, demographic, health, and so on. And so, yes, as pointed out, this is typically where you start out and where you start thinking about what digital twins could bring even further beyond this. The second level is the experimental level. And this is quite already a quantum leap versus the awareness level, in the sense that it will bring the capability of running simulations. So all of a sudden, a lot of complexity is added because you can run what if simulations. This requires models, but yeah, okay, these models, they don't just run by themselves. So you also need the data to feed to these models. You need to be aware of whether this data and these models are a match. And also you will need a more structured way of working with your data and the way you integrate everything. And that's where scenario management comes into view, which gives you a kind of a structured way of thinking about digital twin use cases, different scenarios you may want to run, and the way you are dealing with experimenting with that. Of course, in this case, oh, you're going a bit fast, sorry, Carlo. Yes, in this case, you need a bit more of capabilities, but the involvement of experts is quite limited. So you don't need a lot of expertise in-house to necessarily run such a twin. If we move then on to the predictive twins, there we want to anticipate on what could happen. For instance, imminent flooding or some other emergency situations. And this already needs more demanding data flows, near real-time data flows, and vetted models of which you know that, I mean, you can at least rely on and ensure that whatever they say is remotely a possibility, so that you don't take the wrong conclusions. Also, I mean, as this adds to the complexity of your digital twin, you will need more expertise. Not only better technical coverage in terms of components and complexity, but also organizational, the expertise you have in the management of data in a mature way, and the availability of data engineers that can make sense of data and the outcome of models, and that can validate also the outcome of models, for instance. And the last level is where we what we call intelligent twins, and these are more systems that are capable of running autonomous and taking autonomous decisions, and that also could interact with the real world. Typical examples there is using real-time data streams, and perhaps also AI models to anticipate on traffic jams occurring and steering traffic through dynamic signalization, for instance. And other examples exist. This really requires a higher level of maturity, and you really need expert support in order to make sure that these models operate properly and are monitored properly. So obviously you have the four different levels, one being the awareness, on the other side, four being intelligent. As you go from one to the other, you will need not only more technical components, and it will add technical complexity, but it will also require more from you as an organization in terms of maturity in dealing with data models, but also at the level of the domain experts. Okay. So this is a preliminary architecture drawing. Sorry, it's a much work in progress. I need to point that out. So it's probably still subject to changes. Of course, it didn't come falling out of the sky. It's based on what we have found coming from the consultation, but also based on the experience of some of the consortium members in actually building and operating digital twins. And it is also built on knowledge drawn from existing reference architectures, so none of it is new. Of course, we don't have the time to zoom in on every individual component, but rather what we did is to, based on what is needed in every ambition level, we would like to know what you, as a potential digital twin operator, would deem to be very important in each and every one of these ambition levels, so that we can have a better idea of where we should focus on in terms of specifically describing and specifying some of these components. I will briefly explain the big blocks so that you can, in your minds, when the questions come in a slide or two, can relate that to what is being presented there. So the little blue boxes on the sides are data space connectors, and these, the way they are depicted, seems to suggest that they are not important. This is not true, but they open up the digital twin to the outside world, you could say, both in terms of being able to find data sources, being able to find data models, schemas, but also simulation models, AI models, and so on. But the other way around as well, the capability of publishing your data, your findings from running your digital twin is also enabled through these data space connectors. So they will probably play an important role in establishing something like a digital twin marketplace, if you want, later in the future. More specific towards the digital twin infrastructure itself. At the bottom left, we have anything around data sources. Why is it a separate box? Because the assumption is that data is not necessarily coming from your digital twin locally. It might be delivered through other partners, other governmental entities. Although it could be deployed locally, it might as well be something that is remote and that interacts through interfaces with your local digital twin deployment. Similarly, right to it, there is the models and the algorithms. Again, these could be deployed locally, but are not necessarily locally available. It could be that a model is provided as a service, where you have a third party, could even be a private partner, offering a digital service in the form, or model in the form of a digital service. The biggest block, which is on top left, is the core architecture, where you have some important subsections. Of course, you have what we call the integrated environment, which is an integrated user interface where most of the components of the digital twin are available in an integrated fashion, keeping you from having to log in into separate tools multiple times in order to operate the digital twin. Below that is the security. Obviously, I mean, it's a mandatory part of any enterprise architecture, this being one. Next to the integrated environment, we have the asset registry, which is where you keep track of whatever it is that you're using. So it could be data sources, it could be simulation models, but also things like the schemas you're using, including a definition of semantics if available. Things like transformation that you want to use to map from one standard to another, for instance, and so on. Then a separate block is reserved for case and scenario management. I've explained that this is something you probably want to do to organize a bit in a structured way. If you have a smart city use case, that you can organize it around a smart city case with different scenarios you want to compare and in which you can run experiments. And then finally, there's also something about storage of data and the ability to query that data as well. The biggest block is the integration layer, which you, from some point of complexity, will definitely need. We have a very good idea from experience on how to organize that. I think it's going to be a quite important component. Aside from these technical components, there's some other components as well, less core components, and also not only technical components, but Carlos will discuss them further later on. So that brings us to the next slide. We will ask some input from you in terms of prioritization of these components, not necessarily the components themselves, but what you can actually do with them. So we hope that that way it's not too abstract and that you can easily, regardless of your backgrounds, decide which is more important for you to be able to do with your digital twin. So you can connect to the Slido tool through the QR code r2slido.com and then entering the Slido number below. Once the slides with the options show, we will open the poll so that you can immediately start prioritizing your choices. In the meantime, we will continue explaining what all of these choices mean for just in case that's necessary. And after then I'm done explaining them, we will give some more time to finish that poll before we move on. It's not too many questions, so it shouldn't take too long. I suggest we go at it. All right, so the first one is, I've explained these different levels of digital twins, these different ambition levels. And the first question we have for you is to let us know which one you are envisaging deploying in your context, in your local community. And okay, for your reference, I've added the descriptions again. So you have the awareness, the experimental, the predictive, and the intelligent digital twin in that order of complexity. We shall probably give another 10 to 15 seconds to allow people to make their choice.
Yes, Philippe, maybe for this first question, let's give, I don't know, 1 full minute. So to also allow for the time for everyone to switch to Slido. So again, slido.com, and then you need these code here to find our questions. 2271240.
Yeah, keep in mind what I said earlier. Higher levels of complexity also demand higher levels of maturity of your local organization. So probably not everyone should aim for the more complex, the most complex digital twins.
I'll go back to the slide with the instructions to access the Slido. Maybe for those of you who still haven't managed to find the relevant polls.
Meanwhile, Carlo and Philippe, I think there's a few comments and remarks in the chat. I don't know if there's, while people log in, if there's one or two you would like to pick up on. Otherwise, of course, as I said in the beginning, we can then answer to some of these comments and remarks in written after the meeting, as you see fit.
Yes, I think I will probably, after I'm done presenting, try to address these questions to the extent possible in the chat.
Perfect, Philippe.
Okay, questions are starting, replies are starting to flow in. So maybe Philippe, let's keep this open for, yes, I don't know, 20 more seconds, and then let's keep going.
Perfect.
Don't forget, for all the participants, not to exit the Slido, as now you see these questions, but then we'll have them one after the other, so you can all stay in the same place and you just see all of them.
There is one question I could already answer. So the toolbox will not contain a full implementation of this architecture. Rather, it will provide a list of components that are interoperable or sufficiently a sufficient fit for using in this architecture, where we will obviously be focusing on tools that are open source and that are adhering to open standards and the MIMs that have also already been mentioned in the chat as well. So it's not the intention to eventually come up with a ready to deploy system that you can take off the shelf.
Carlo, I don't know if it's possible that you would share the results live of what people are replying, if you have that active. Otherwise, we keep it like that.
Yeah, we thought of keeping it like this so that the respondents can see the results on their own screen, but here they always have a continuous reference to what the question is, as sometimes questions require a little bit of an explanation and the instruction to access the Slido. By the way, Flip, now we have a good number of replies for this one, so I think we can also move to the next one.
Perfect.
Shall I scroll down?
Yes,
There it
yes,
is.
please. Yes, please. So at the basic level, although it is the most basic level, that doesn't mean that the features that are typically covered in there should not be prioritized. So at this basic level, we already have some of these ingredients or things you want to do or need to pay attention to. What we would kindly ask of you is rank the 5 most important ones according to you. So you can choose 5, and then you can put them in the order of what you think is the most important one. First one is visualization. Often this is an important aspect of a digital twin or local digital twin. This can be 2D or 3D. Another one that you might find important is data management and data governance. You are going to display a lot of data and maybe also make that publicly available. So it's important to be aware of what kind of data you are going to publish, understanding that data, the nature of that data before you do so. Sensing and measuring. So you might want to show some results from sensors. These can be air quality sensors, water quality sensors, and so on. Maybe data privacy and integrity is important for you. You're going to show data. How do you make sure that you don't have any accidental privacy leaking in your data? Making sure that you're compliant in that respect. Security in the sense of controlling access to some resources might be important as well. It's probably not only open data that you want to use in your digital twin environment. So maybe you want to shield access to some of these data sets. And then, of course, general security is important as well. Discoverability of data. I've mentioned the data spaces, which is one way of achieving this, is also important. Not all of the data will probably be produced by you or yourself, and having a good idea of what data exists out there to integrate in your digital twin is quite important. And finally, reporting and communication tooling might also be a topic of interest, because you're not typically running or deploying the digital twin just for yourself. So if you're going to do some communication around that, you need to address the proper tooling. Again, a few minutes for you to complete your response.
Yeah, Philip, we have a good number of replies, so
Great. Let's move
whenever
on.
you want, we can move
Yes.
to the experimental twin.
Go ahead. As explained earlier, moving from awareness to experimental is quite a quantum leap already. Things that you could look at there are case and scenario management. I've tried to explain that before. You want a structured way of modeling cases and scenarios and running experiments in them. In the previous, at the previous ambition level, we had data discoverability. Here, since we are working with models now, we also want model discoverability. What we want to also achieve is making sure that we can fit models across, or use models across different digital twins, and also in combination with different data sources. So, but in order to be able to do that, you have to have models to be discoverable. Data and model management is important. So where we had data management and governance first, we also extend this now to models, understanding what these models do, maybe also where they come from, with what intent they were published, and to what extent they are compatible with your data sets and what expectations they have over your data. Obviously, if you run models, you will get output data, which you may want to publish. So data publishing becomes a topic of interest as well. And if you're going to do what if scenarios, you could envision involving different stakeholders, not in the least citizens. So you might want to use some community management tooling in order to support you there. And finally, I've explained that also. I mean, the digital twin now becomes a bit more complex with more moving parts, and you might want to have an integrated user experience that allows you to work with single sign-on, where all the core tools that we also and capabilities that we just came to explain are kind of integrated into one user experience. Again, here, few minutes to decide what's most important to you in terms of capabilities. These topics mostly relate to technical building blocks. The non-technical building blocks will be addressed in a few minutes by Carlo. See some questions suggesting that these are important as well, and we concur.
Yeah, and also I see that some participants would like to have a look at the live results of the replies. What we would like to do is to go through all the questions, and maybe at the end of our session we can show a preview of what all the results of all the replies that you have provided.
Few more seconds to finish up.
Yeah, we also have a good number of replies for experimental flipped indeed. So
let's move on then to the predictive level.
Here it is.
Yes. Typically, predictive twins is more fast-moving data and more data in terms of volume as well. And so that's the level where having an analytical dashboard becomes quite important, or could become quite important. And of course, it's something that runs on near real-time data streams. So you want to have this capability as well. Perhaps you also want to be able to interact with the environment. Imagine that based on a replay of an actual data stream, you want to manipulate something in the virtual environment to see the effect of that. Then this is a capability that might come in handy. This is something that's typically applied in a context such as closing down a road or doing some other manipulation to see what happens if you do that. Also, more advanced data and model governance becomes important. So you get aspects such as data lineage, data provenance, and the same happens to models. So understanding from data where it comes from, maybe there were some other processing steps applied before you're using it. You want to be aware of that. You want to be aware of all of its quality attributes, and the same goes for models. So that's a bit higher level of data and model governance. The arsenal of possible or potential models that you will be using is growing. And so maybe you want more guidance on what algorithms are suitable for your specific purpose, your specific problem that you're trying to solve. Or maybe what algorithms are certainly not a match. Typically, that's something that is still a bit abstract to people. So guidance on that area might be interesting. Also having a model, a data marketplace where we can share models and data sources among each others is also something of value. And finally, the ability to generate synthetic data for testing and validation is also a capability that was coming up often and that we have included at this level because it's not always possible to find appropriate data for testing purposes. Or at least not appropriate data that's not privacy sensitive. So in that case, in order for privacy issue, having synthetic data might be interesting. I'm assuming that the recording could be made disposable. Yes, okay. Let's see the question.
Philippe, I see that participants are getting a grip of the tool as we already have many replies. So whenever you want, we can also move to the intelligent twin.
Be happy to. The final level, the most complex level. So here you have real-time live data streams. So this is calling from low latency and high volume architectures. Also, you want probably a higher level of situational awareness. This is through integrated experiences, oversight and control, dashboarding. So I'm envisaging like a war room where you have multiple screens where you're on top of things and managing your city. So this is quite advanced. Obviously, as we are actually on quick responsive system, the importance of AI models is increasing. And so maybe you want the capability of selecting and operating more advanced AI models. Attention is going to, in that case, also algorithm or model data and data transparency. You want to be able to tell people, inform people how data came to be, what AI model was used, how it was trained, with what data was it trained, and ideally also have some level of explainability, explainable AI, to ensure that it's not too much of a black box and you have no way of validating what's coming out of it. Also, the ability of having real-world asset manipulation. So that means that there's kind of a feedback loop to your city, to your environment, whether this is for traffic control or controlling assets such as valves and levees and so on, or a direct line to emergency services. These are all possibilities. And finally, also quite advanced in terms of capabilities is the possibility to have augmented reality and virtual reality visualization, or maybe even using that to manipulate the actual things in the world through these feedback loops. As you can see, these are much more advanced features and capabilities than at the beginning. I see some questions popping up as of that we are not looking at the design of specific models, or looking at specific models. This is true because I think that would be a lot of work. There's so many models, and for each thing you want to model, there's potentially multiple approaches of modeling that. So we think that this would really blow up the scope. what will be included, or what the ambition is to include in the toolbox, is to have some kind of categorization of different models, and to what kind of problems that these models apply, so that a conscious choice can be made as of what technology do I use to attack a certain problem. But all of that is relevant, whether it's about modeling aspects of the city or aspects of human behavior. I think it's all relevant, obviously.
Philippe, we already have quite a few replies, so
yes,
if you
to
agree,
conclude,
yeah.
fine. Yeah, to conclude, I come back to the proposed architecture, or at least the architecture in progress, because all of these capabilities reflect to at least one or more of these blocks, and that's the idea. It will help us prioritize on what blocks to focus, what blocks to give more details on, to look deeper into, and maybe some blocks that are better understood already are available, can have a bit less of our attention. So with that, I conclude my part, and I would give back control and the words to Carlo. Yes.
Thank you, Philippe. Yeah, back to me with a couple of more questions for you. And as someone rightly pointed out in the chat, yeah, we have technical tools, but also cities would definitely need other types of tools as well. Like, for instance, strategic tools. And these are 5 of particular importance that have emerged throughout the consultations. So once again, we would ask you to rank them, to let us know, in your opinion, which one is the most important, down to the one that would have the lowest priority. And let's quickly go through them together while you try to rank them. The first one is a reference architecture. So what is that? Basically, you remember the overview of building blocks that we just saw with Philippe? Well, imagine that, but with an explanation of what each building block is, and especially with with different building blocks lighting up depending on what your ambition level is. So if you have a certain level of ambition, this reference architecture would let you know which are the building blocks that you really cannot do without. So this is the first tool. The second one, a tool for conducting a self-assessment of your ambition level, and to basically create a roadmap to go from your current level of maturity and achieve your desired one, your desired vision, your desired ambition. Then one more tool for self-assessment, this time to identify the security risks that are present in connection with the development and deployment of a local digital twin. Moving to the fourth one, a certification framework. So basically, in a nutshell, a list of all the relevant certifications that you would need to set up a local digital twin, and a step-by-step guide to explain you how to obtain them. And last but not least, very important, a catalog of tech solutions and use cases, together complemented by a benchmarking tool to make comparisons between these available solutions as use cases, and thus understand which ones would be reusable in your own context or in the field or sector you would be interested in. So these are the strategic tools. Take 1 minute to rank them again, from the most important to the one that, in your opinion, has the lowest priority. And if you feel that we've missed any important strategic tool, feel free to drop us a line in the chat. Of course, we'll be collecting all of that. Okay, quite a few replies already. So without hesitation, we'll move to a very similar question, the same question, but this time focusing on the legal tools. So here we're mostly talking about guidelines. Okay. Once again, 5 options. Feel free to rank them, and let's go through them together. First of all, we have guidelines for data management. So working with data can be complex. Breaking silos within different administrations and also within the same administration is frequently very, very challenging. So these would be guidelines on how to do that and how to change the data culture within the organization. Second one is consists of guidelines for the generation and use of privacy preserving synthetic data. So synthetic data is information that is artificially generated. So it can be used to feed models, like to train machine learning models. And these guidelines would help understand how to create that synthetic data while preserving privacy at all times. Third tool is guidelines for the procurement of local digital twin components. So how to basically draft terms of reference that are standardized, fair, reasonable. Moving to the fourth one, we have once again guidelines. This time, guidelines to help you, the cities, involve stakeholders in data protection impact assessments. And finally, a playbook to design, implement, and monitor the transactions with private actors. This is, well, a well-known issue. The private sector has a lot of data, but obviously sometimes there is just not much interest in sharing it with the public sector, or when that happens, still there are a number of contractual clauses that may hamper the use that then the public authority can make with that data. And so this playbook will basically guide and help to properly manage this sort of interaction with the private sector. While I give you 30 more seconds to reply to this one, I think that we will need a little bit of extra time just to, this is a message for Pepe, who was wondering whether we could have a look at the results here together live. I think we'll need a little bit of time in the background to work on the results before being able to show them. So probably I'll, in a minute, I'll give the floor to my colleague here for the next session while we keep working on the results, and maybe at one point I'll jump back in to show you a preview of the results. Okay, perfect. So I think we already have quite a good number. We'll keep the Slido open because there will be more questions in a minute, so don't close it. But I think that we've already collected a lot of very useful feedback on these preliminary building blocks. And as it was mentioned at the outset of this workshop, well, in the coming weeks, we will keep working on these building blocks. We will add detail to them. So, with a view to really prepare design a toolbox that is going to be useful for the cities to set up and operate local digital twins. But so thank you very much for the feedback so far, and I'll hand it over back to Ines or Gert for the next session.
Indeed, it's for Gert now.
Thank you very much, Carlo. And also thanks to Philippe for having quite an in-depth conversation about many different building blocks. I think that has actually been very useful to gain a better understanding about the nature of the toolbox. And now we kind of need to switch gears a little bit, because now for the next 25 minutes or so, I would like to talk with you about how actually the toolbox can be deployed from an organizational, from a governance perspective, to actually make it sustainable and to make it a success. So what I would like to talk with you about now is the kind of possible administrative or governance structure of the organization that's going to deploy the toolbox, and two scenarios we actually have developed to give you two examples. How we actually can engage with the community, which is of course of utmost importance for the toolbox, because the community of course is you. And then also very briefly to talk about potential funding options. The idea is also to have some questions on Slido, just to get your feedback, and they're actually all open-ended questions. So please actually do share your thoughts on this, and we will have time for you to do so. So no ranking during this part of the presentation. My name is Gert Hilgers. I'm with OASC, Open and Agile Smart Cities, that I believe many of you will have heard of. And I look forward to guiding you now through this part of the presentation. Before we actually start and look at the scenarios in more detail that we've developed, I would actually like for you to respond to one question within a minute or so. And that's, I know we're starting with the big questions. It's about actually the deciding factor you believe for actually having a sustainable toolbox in the long term. So please do keep in mind when responding to this question that it's actually about the administrative structure and the governance of the toolbox. So based on your experience, based on your sector, based on the organization you're working for, what do you believe actually is the one most important factor? If you like, you can also mention 2 or 3 to actually make this work long term. So please do take about a minute, half a minute to think about it and half a minute to actually put it in the Slido box. And once again, if you should have trouble to accessing it, you can find it under slido.com, so SLIDO.com, and the number you need to put in there is 2271240. But I hope that you have all found this for the previous questions already. Okay, so let's take perhaps 20 more seconds. Then actually let's move on. So when it comes to the scenario building part on how to deploy the toolbox, we were thinking about a couple of kind of key challenges for us that we need to consider. On the one hand, we need to find an organizational structure really that can support the cooperation between cities, between industry, between academia. I just want to mention I used academia throughout all the slides. This also, of course, can include research organizations and innovation organizations that are not strictly working in the field of academia. But the point is really that we need to bring these different parts, and we need to bring you together that are here today to work on this together. And the question is, how can we actually provide a structure to do so? The second point is, as I already briefly mentioned earlier, it's really important to actually have an active community, to build a community. Once again, you might very well become part of it. And we need to think about how can we actually organize the community, how can we steer the toolbox, how can we maintain and develop tools in the toolbox over time. And of course, the third challenge is ultimately also how to fund it, because that's of course also a key part of the sustainability that is really of most importance when it comes to the toolbox and this current phase of the project. The core criteria, therefore, that we actually put together for developing these scenarios that I will be sharing in a moment is that it's community driven, based on basically an open source way. I believe you've or you might have come across this term before, and I will mention a little bit more about this later on in the presentation. And the important part here is really that we need to think about a community-driven organization, not just on a technical level when it comes to the software and tool development, but also when it actually comes to the governance level, just to highlight this one more time. Technology agnostic, it should be, in this case, based on interoperability and the MIMS Plus in case of the EU. This has already been mentioned briefly, at least previously, so I don't need to go into much more detail on this part. And then the self-sustainability, once again, we're looking at basically different layers when it comes to sustainability, the governance part, the community part, and the funding part. So these were kind of the core ideas and criteria when we were actually putting the two scenarios together that I'm going to present now. So let's start with the first one, the network of networks, and this is actually a working title. If you do have a better way to describe it, please let us know. And the idea is that this is somewhat inspired by living in EU, which many of you will be aware of. And it would either be set up as its own legal entity, or it might very well also be embedded in an existing network. And the core idea behind this is to actually link city, innovation, and industry networks together and work very closely with the networks and make use of their reach, their credibility, to actually increase adoption and make sure that the toolbox is actually being used. The way we envision this to work is that we can have different working groups, cross-sector ones in particular, where actually cities would be working with, once again, industry and academia and innovation networks on developing and testing tools, and some of the ones that we might have seen previously, and also to govern the intellectual property part, because obviously this is also a very important aspect when it comes to governance, that we are looking at this organization, whichever it might be, that actually takes care of the toolbox, also hold the intellectual property. And the other aspect is that actually the core tools will, of course, also be freely available to interested parties in the future. And I will get back to this in a moment as well. So why we actually are considering this option and the scenario is because ultimately the goal is for it to be led by active, credible networks. And this, of course, is a benefit in itself because, once again, because of the outreach that this provides, because of the likely higher adoption rate that this supplies. And of course, the working groups can actually also benefit effectively from the wider network, therefore potentially getting more expertise or more niche expertise if it's needed. So these are actually strong benefits of this approach. Possible concerns, though, and I'm not trying to assess the whole model, but I'm just trying to give an idea what might be an issue to consider. Or in this case, two issues really is, on the one hand, that of course, one of the issues that can arise is that there will be some turf wars between networks, because networks are not just individual cities, but they also are active in their own niche. And when it comes to taking charge of a certain tool, for instance, taking charge within the steering group of a certain topic, there might be complications that, of course, also need to be managed. And this goes back to the way how actually the whole organization can be governed. And what we try to avoid, of course, is also fragmentation, that in the end, we will have one network working on this tool, another network on another tool, and they're not really cooperating with each other. And then, of course, well, that's not what we want. The second possible concern is that when actually primarily dealing with networks, that then it would be easy to say for us, oh, it's not a problem. I mean, there's so many cities involved, so many vendors involved, so many research institutions involved. But at the same time, of course, it means that we still need to make an extra effort of actually engaging with the local representatives of these organizations and cities and not just fully rely on the networks. The second scenario, again, it's a working title. For now, we call it community-led, is organized in a different way. In a way, it's more decentralized, and it's been loosely inspired by the City Protocol Society. Some of you might know it. It was actually an approach from about a decade ago that originally was headed by Barcelona, and it was used by a good range of international cities, companies, and research institutions. And the idea here is that it's a city-led organization, which means that in all the kind of governance aspects in steering committees, you would have a majority of cities, so that actually they can provide the roadmap, and they can actually decide which way they're heading. But at the same time, it would actually include industry and academia, and again, research institutions in there as well. And the idea is that you would actually be working on key challenges of cities. So what they actually used to call task and finish teams, what others might be calling working groups, were actually small organizational groups with a clear focus on actually solving a problem, where a few cities would come together, say, here's our issue, we do need to find a solution, and then basically just partnering up with third parties and working specifically on this problem until it is solved. And this actually was quite of a goal-oriented process that we might not always have in other organizations when it comes to working groups. This could, of course, also be organized in a way that it's its own legal entity, or it can potentially also be managed by an existing entity. But yeah, the point really is it's led by cities. And by the way, when I say cities, it might also include, of course, other forms of regional cooperation on a city level or administrative level. And of course, the other part is also governing intellectual property, which is of high importance. Why we chose this, or why we chose it to be a scenario, so we are considering it for the assessment and for choosing it in the end, is because of the fact that it's led by cities, which really means that we're focusing, and the organization would be focusing on their needs. And there's no other way around it, because it's also an approach for really having an open community that might be city-led, but it's really open and inclusive to all sorts of other organizations to join and to participate in, and that we believe it is actually quite attractive for companies as well as third parties to actually join, simply because of this idea of pushing things forward. And this, of course, is interesting for academia because, I mean, you do like to have impact with the work you're doing. It's interesting for cities because they know they have a problem they can solve. And it's interesting for companies because they know if they participate, they might come up with their own kind of third-party services they can put on top of it and potentially make some profit. The possible concerns are that it's a slightly more potentially complex managerial structure, and it might take more time to set up compared to the network of networks approach. And also that there might be, it might be a bit more of a challenge to actually find cities and third parties to actually engage in this approach, simply because it might not have the initial support, at least of big networks that can help with marketing and with pushing their members to actually become a member. Now, two aspects really I want to highlight when it comes to the sustainability part, after having given you this kind of overview about these two scenario options, which in a way you could also argue one is kind of more federated, one is more centralized. And the key perspective here really is that we do want to make use of this open source community. This is also why we're having this workshop today, to get your feedback, to really bring kind of the stakeholders in and to see how this actually can work and how can we make sure that we have a wide variety of people and organizations to support this. I want to strain one more time the fact that when we're looking at governance, or the term governance, we're basically looking at different layers. We're looking at the governance on the one hand of the organization itself that is managing the toolbox, and on the other hand, we're looking, of course, also potentially at the governance of the specific working groups or tools that actually are being developed. And governance in this regard can mention, it can mean quite a few different things. And here I just want to point out, based on the example by Red Hat in their summary on kind of mature governance models when it comes to software development, that there's really also very different approaches how actually software projects can be managed, in particular, of course, in this case, open source ones. And what we need to make sure is when we think about the structure of the organization, that these are compatible. Because it doesn't make sense when we actually eventually have steering committees and the formal governance of our organization, but it's quite incompatible with actually how tools are being developed. So just to keep in mind, it's really an open source approach in spirit, not just for the tool development, but also for the organization itself. And so aspects like transparency are very important, like, of course, collaboration among stakeholders with a focus on cities. But also on being inclusive and really having a look at who's doing what, and that actually people that are organizations and cities that are ready to take charge, that they actually also have the opportunity to do that. And of course, it would be helpful if more advanced cities, even more advanced cities of the advanced cities that the toolbox is meant for, can actually also play an important role. But ultimately, it is about the community, and that's really the key point here. Therefore, the next question I have for you is, so from your perspective, and again, based on your background, what do you believe actually is really important, and how can we actually build this kind of sustainable open source community for the toolbox? So please do use the open text box to share some of your views. I just want to strain one more time that we're not just presenting this here, but we really want your feedback, because the feedback will have a direct impact on the assessment of the scenario options and also on the nature of the toolbox. So please make use of the impact you have and share your thoughts. So let's give this perhaps 90 seconds so that you have a little bit of time to think about it, and then also, share your ideas. Okay, so let's wait 30 more seconds for you to finish. Okay, so then let's actually move to the second question that I would like to ask you as well here, once again for perhaps 60 seconds to 90 seconds. And this is the question on how we can keep you engaged, but in particular, with a particular focus on actually the governance level. So this later on, you will be asked again how we can stay in touch with you. But no, this is actually a question based on how could you imagine actually being part of a governance structure, taking care of the toolbox, and how would you want to engage with us? So this actually shows us and gives us some ideas into what are the kind of realistic options, and yeah, how to help you to play an important role in the whole toolbox. Okay, 10 more seconds. My apologies if I sound like a teacher, calling out the time that's left. Okay, so the second aspect that I mentioned already early on is when we talk about sustainability, or the third one, in fact, is potential funding and revenue streams. And considering what I've been presenting now in the past 20 minutes, the question is, of course, how can we make it a sustainable toolbox? And this, of course, depends on different aspects. It does depend on the governance model, of course, but it also, realistically speaking, it does depend on adoption rates and ultimately the scope of this organization. So is it really just about being a lean managerial structure or an administrative structure for the open source development of tools, or actually is it going to be slightly more extensive? We are still working on this, and it doesn't make it necessarily easier that the kind of core services of the toolbox actually are going to be free and going to be available, of course, but still we need to make sure that it's sustainable in the long term. So therefore, what I would like to ask you is actually, and it's a second last question, to think about what, based on your understanding of the toolbox so far, on the one hand, based on the building blocks that were presented earlier, also now on the governance model, what do you believe actually could be revenue options that we should be looking into that would be actually okay for your organization to make use of as well, and ultimately to pay for? So please do take 1 minute for this, and then we are going to wrap up after that. And also, if you have any examples of other projects you've been working on, and they have interesting kind of revenue streams, please do share. This would also be very useful for us. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this, and in particular on the funding. Now let's get to the last slide and one more question we have. But yeah, first of all, just very briefly, I want to share what's going to happen next. So we've been creating these scenarios and been working on the different aspects I've been talking about and sharing with you today. The next step is very soon to actually finish the assessment of these scenarios. And what really is important is your feedback. And this is why I've been reiterating this and stressing this. It does matter for our assessment, and it does matter to actually choosing options over the others, basically. So please, if you haven't yet, please still do fill out the questions and give us some ideas, because ultimately you're really shaping the toolbox, and you might very well be someone who's actually going to be using it or partnering with us to develop it, or just be a contributor. So it's actually useful for you to share your thoughts. After that, we're going to select the best fit for purpose scenario. And then in just about 2 minutes, you will hear more about the kind of roadmap for the toolbox. Before we start with this, though, the very last question I have for you is, well, what did we actually miss? So is there anything important you believe when it comes to the governance and the deployment of the toolbox that I should have mentioned and I have not? So please, yeah, share your thoughts on this. The more you criticize, the better. And also what kind of thoughts you might have about improving the kind of deployment and maintenance. So please share your thoughts with us for the next, well, let's say 90 seconds. And then afterwards, we can continue with the roadmap. Okay, so 20 more seconds, and then please do come slowly to an end. Of course, if you have more comments, please, I mean, either write them in the chat or get in touch with us afterwards. So for now, thank you very much for actually listening to me and sharing your thoughts. We much appreciate it. And let's continue with the roadmap part.
And Gert, I seize the opportunity to remind all participants to hit the submit button. You know, now that you have replied to all these questions, that really allows us to save your contributions. Otherwise, we risk losing that.
Thank you for pointing this out, Carlo. So yeah, please do save it and submit it, and please go ahead, Will.
Thank you, Gert. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. So as Gert anticipated, we would like to give you a view on the roadmap for deployment. This work is still in progress, but we wanted to take the opportunity today to check with you any idea, any feedback, any concern you might have, and to gather your feedback and to be able to take it into account for the finalization of this work. So we also have a few Slido questions that you will see after we explain what we want to gather from you, the feedback we want to gather from you. Very quickly here, just to give you an understanding of how we plan to present this roadmap, and we were very happy to see a few comments in the chat already that might relate to this. I see a comment that the timeline has no year, not yet. So again, it's work in progress. It's just a framework to show you how this would look like. So there will be a timeline indeed with years and with months. So we will also have these phases that we have presented: preparation, design, implementation, deployment, and operation. And then we will have the streams that you see to the left: toolbox development, awareness increase, community engagement, governance activities, and constant update. We will go through this now, so we gather your feedback with a brief explanation of what it's supposed to be under these phases and streams. And of course, there will be detailed actions. Today we have here a few examples, so we can also gather your ideas, any topic that is on top of your mind. And again, it's work in progress, so you will see very high level content, but we thought it would be a great opportunity to already start interacting with you and co-creating this roadmap together. So I think we can go to the second slide, where we will be discussing what are the different phases and a brief explanation of what we mean by each of them. And for this one, we already have a question. So we would like to ask you if you agree with these phases, and if not, what would you do differently in this roadmap for deployment based on your experience or any situation you are familiar with. So for the first one, we have the preparation, and the goal of this phase is to set up for the development and also the scaling up of the toolbox, although there will be a roadmap also for the scaling up and the evolution. After that, we have the design, which is aimed to design the development and the deployment of the toolbox, but also from a governance perspective and the technical point of view. We have then the implementation, which the main goal is, of course, to develop and test the toolbox and to implement also the governance model. In the deployment, the main idea is to deploy the toolbox across the different communities and to gather feedback and start also with the training activities. So we already gathered a few ideas, for example, what you were mentioning for the raising awareness and for the activities of training, to have some videos based on the target audience. We would be very happy if you also bring those ideas once you see the questions that we have in Slido. And finally, for the operation, the main goal of the phase is to run and maintain the toolbox, but also to update and scale up and to have the continuous monitoring to ensure that the tool is still fit for purpose. So you can see now here the QR code, but I think we can give you again the code for Slido if that's useful. So you will see two questions: if you agree with the phases, and if not, what would you do differently? So we would be very happy to take those ideas into account. Now that you can see here the content, we will give you a few seconds and we will briefly present those ideas and results after the presentation. It's only 3 slides, so we will very quickly see results. Okay, I think you can still reply if you are on it, but in the meantime, we will go also to ensure that we stay in time to the next one. We want to present and talk to you about the streams that we have identified to ensure the main idea of having these phases and also the streams is to ensure that we are covering all important aspects. So for us, it's critical that you give us also your feedback if you see that any of the phases or any of the streams have any aspect missing or would be even more user-friendly or easy to follow if they would be there, and we will be happy to implement that. So what do we mean by the toolbox development? This one is self-explanatory. The main idea, the purpose of this stream is to ensure that the technical functioning of the toolbox. Then we have awareness increase, and is to increase the awareness about the LDT across EU communities, as you were mentioning. Then we have community engagement, and the main purpose is to ensure that we engage constantly with EU communities from the design of the toolbox, the development, but also the governance and the evolution perspective. Then we have the governance activities, and is to ensure the day-to-day running of the toolbox and also to ensure that there is the right knowledge transfer between stakeholders. And finally, we have the constant evolution of this tool, because as you saw before, we want it to be self-sustainable. So the main purpose is to keep it fit for purpose, as we said before, to ensure that it continues to meet the expectations of those who are involved, and it continues to involve other stakeholders as well with the evolution and depending on their needs. And again, we have 2 questions for you here. Taking into account that, as we said, is still work in progress, is high-level content. Any idea that you might have, any feedback? If you agree with these streams in combination with the phases, and if not, what would you do differently when it comes to the roadmap creation? We will give you a few seconds so you can reply to those questions. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Here there is a bit more of content, so we can discuss it. And again, there is a question about this slide, this content presentation, that again, given that this is work in progress, if there is anything that you have in mind, any other action that you think it's important to consider, we would be very happy to take it into account, and we would be very happy to read it in your answers. So as you can see, here is a high-level view, understanding of what we mean by each of those actions that will be related to the phases and the streams. There will be, the idea is to have a matrix where we see all the actions that have to be considered for the deployment of the toolbox. Those actions will have a deadline, as we mentioned, a range, a time. They will also have the stakeholders that have been identified and need to be involved for the success of the implementation. There will also be a priority. They are major or minor initiatives, and there will be a status. Some of them might be in progress or not even started, so it's easier to follow up on those, on the different set of actions. To give you again a high-level view on what could be the actions in the preparation, we have here a few ideas: project plan definition and project document base, for example. Then in terms of awareness increase, we will need to identify and contact the communities. As you can imagine, this work is already in progress. There would be also an engagement plan definition, and there would also be the risk identification and the governance principle definitions. Of course, the preparation phase is already something ongoing, so most of these actions are happening. Then if we move to the design, we will have the deployment, the scenario design, and the definition of the KPIs for the deployment. We would start raising awareness, and this is an action that would happen continuously. That's why you can see it happens all across the different phases. And I think that was also an idea that was in the chat commented by you, that there has to be this continuous interaction with the communities and gather feedback from them. So that's also one of the main ideas we have here. We will have co-creation in terms of the requirements identification and prioritization. I think that's also we aim to do today with this type of workshops. We would have the governance model and change management definition, and then we have the definition of the monitoring KPIs. So we define the KPIs for deployment and implementation, and then we would also have monitoring KPIs. These are some ideas that will be refined in time with also the outcome of the rest of the activities you have seen today. So we take it slow now, so you can also be thinking of any important action that should be in any of these phases and streams, and you can already start giving your answers in the chat if you feel like, or even in the slide which we will be collecting. In the implementation, we have the development of the toolbox. We continue with raising awareness. We test the toolbox with the communities to ensure that we continue to have them engaged and that, as we said, the toolbox is fit for purpose. And then there would be the implementation of the governance model and also the change management plan. For the deployment, we have the deployment of the toolbox as such. We continue to raise awareness about what is here and what is also about to come. And then we start organizing workshops and training for advanced communities. And of course, as you mentioned, it's important to check what's the main target audience and to ensure that the format also fits well with the best way they will take it and they will engage with that content. Then we have the acceptance of the toolbox. And of course, this has to be based on the fulfillment of the defined goals and requirements. And finally, we would be collecting and analyzing feedback from the different communities and proposing solutions to any issue or concern that has been raised. Finally, we have the operation, which we said is mostly about ensuring that there is support and maintenance and also the updates of the toolbox. And we also took into account something was in the chat, mentioning that there should be different releases and any updates should be distinguished. So it can also be follow-up. We will continue to raise awareness because, as we said, this is something happening across all phases, and we will also gather feedback from the communities on how the tool is operating. We have the evaluation reports that are also governed by the governance stakeholders, and finally we will have it available to ensure that it can be used for the next cycle of the tool. I know it's high level, but it's still quite a bit of content, so we will keep it here so you can have a look. And if you have any comment about any of these ideas or about these actions, if you have anything that you would like to see here or that you would like to discuss offline, even if necessary, we would be very happy to take that into account. So I think we can give you a bit of time, and then we would like to quickly show some of the results. Because seeing the practical answers, that's always fun. So I don't know if very quickly in the meantime we could already go check the answers for the first one. How do you feel about the phases? Okay, we are happy to see that the percentage of yes is high. And we hope to get some answers from those who do not agree. So let's see if we have some of those replies as well. Oh, it's increasing. The second question is more about the ideas of what would you do different about these phases? Community engagement first. That's a very good comment indeed. I think the order is also important. So we have the engagement around the streams, but for sure we will take it into account when ranking those streams. Hypercare period for the deployment, after deployment, making a difference between implementation and deployment. There is a question where the conceptual development system architecture will be addressed. In design phase, if yes, the description of the phases has to be more precise. That's also a good point. There could be sub-phases in case of need to make it, as we said, more easier to follow up. So not agile enough. Definitely, we can check that also. The process should be more iterative. We have to take into account iterations, that for sure, and it will be reflected in the roadmap, in the final roadmap. So it will also give a better understanding of the agility of those ones. Thank you for the comments. We could also maybe quickly see how is the agreement with the streams. It looks good, but before we said it looked good and then it went down, so we don't know. This one is staying, so maybe we can see a few of your ideas. Conceptual design is missing. What are the necessary tools, how they are connected, and how the overall vision is going to be technically implemented. For sure, we will make it very clear in the actions that are there that these aspects are important. Community and user engagement first, that's something you brought up also with the raising awareness. So we will definitely look at the order of those streams. Pay attention to awareness, education, and training at different starting user levels. That's very important indeed. As the body of intelligence software, next connected twins to allow the tool and other software to discover and act. Also very interesting, and we will definitely take it into account. What is the relation between the phases and the streams? Will all the streams follow the same phases? Yes, so that's the idea, that the phases are fixed and all the streams go through the different phases. So we consider or we identify actions that go depending on the stream, but they will go through the different, so they will, each of them have actions per phase. In addition, I would try to create the necessary standards around that. So there is for sure an exercise around standards that will be reflected in the project. Thank you for your comments again. And very briefly, we can go through the final one. Ecosystem mapping, bringing different stakeholders, actors in the project. Documentation and knowledge management could be another thing which can be considered for the future, totally. Because indeed, we just presented the creation of the document management, what we call the base, but it has to be there reflected clearly. And one is rather vague, yeah, indeed. So it's still high level, this content. So we also totally agree this has to be further defined. What do we mean by continuous raising awareness? The iterations that were mentioned before, and for sure will also be reflected. Standard development. Thank you. Okay, so many thanks to everyone for your replies. I think the Slido poll will still stay open. So if there is anything that comes to your mind, again, we will be very happy to take it into account. And I think we will give the floor to our colleagues who will also show some results from the previous questions.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, we have managed to assess the results also from a previous poll, so I'll now put it on screen as well. Starting from the technical part, Philippe, in case you'd like to have a few words, otherwise I can also jump directly to the non-technical part, since that attracted quite a lot of interest in the chat. So also happy to start from there.
No, sure, I can comment on this. Yeah, we've noticed in earlier analyses that most of the digital twins that we found today were in either the awareness or the experimental ambition level. So this kind of explains or could explain the result here, although there is quite a lot of attention still for the predictive and the intelligent levels as well. And I'm guessing that the toolbox is aiming for these more advanced levels. So we should definitely take into account the specific answers for the lower levels as well, in terms of what basic elements that we also need to focus on. So yeah, we can continue. So yeah, no clear winner here, although that we see that data management and data governance is deemed important. I'm actually happy with that result. I think it is the foundation for ethical, trustworthy digital twins. The visualization still is important because it is often said, well, the digital twin is more than just a visualization, but apparently people still think it's important. And then following up on that, yeah, the ability to measure and to sense what's going on in the city, and data privacy and integrity is also deemed quite important. We continue. The next question, yeah, security is probably more like a basic concern, so that people don't really think it's really important. It's kind of assumed, I guess. Case and scenario management, gaining a lot of votes. I'm also quite happy with that. I think it's important to think in a structured way about how do you set up a case, what scenarios are you envisaging for comparison, and how do you run your experiments. Yes, data model and data and model management, part of the asset registry. I think there is this is a rather important component. I think if you really want to get things under control, if you want to deliver qualityful results, you kind of have to do the housekeeping there. So it's good to see that people are also interested in that. We've seen data discoverability a bit lower in score in the previous question, but model discoverability is still high here. So I guess that they go hand in hand. And the integrated user experience is also somewhat appreciated. So that's also interesting to see. Data publishing still a close runner-up. I think it's also important to publish your results, because if nobody does, it's going to be a bit lonely in the data marketplace. So that's good to see. It's quite it's a bit of a surprise that community tooling was not scoring so high. But maybe it's also something that's assumed to be there. I guess there's also ready-made solutions available that can help you with that. So it's perhaps not something that we should consider as a core part of the architecture. Yes, real-time sensing and data streaming, obviously important at that level of digital twin, along with the analytical environment. We call it the analytical environment, the ability to dive into the data, also have a more engineering view on things, or data engineering view on things, rather than just the 2D, 3D visualization or some dashboarding. And yeah, the fact that advanced data and model governance is receiving sufficient attention here is nice to see. Apparently, interactive world environment is interactive environment is not so important, although the difference is not very big, and there is seemingly less need on the guidance to select the proper algorithms for the right problems. And then, yes, model our data marketplace. It's a bit contradictory, but also, I mean, it's probably in the to be taken into account that the context is different. It's contradictory that this is scoring low to the previous answers, where they say that discoverability of models and data is scoring a bit higher. Yeah, a bit surprised that synthetic data is not considered that important by many people. Maybe also worth having a discussion. Okay, next, the last one, I guess, for me. All right, yeah, real-time digital twin with live data streams. So this aspect of sensing and measuring and having that in real-time streams is scoring quite high across the board. So that's interesting to see. The transparency for algorithms and models, I think this echoes the previous questions as well. You want to have your governance around data and models under control. So this is scoring high. It's nice to see. And then it's the higher level of situational awareness and closely running up the selection of more advanced AI models for prediction and data analysis. AR and visualization is deemed less important here. Also good to know. So yeah, a clear attention point, I guess, to anything around the housekeeping, the management and the governance of models and data. That's kind of a constant in the responses. So that's definitely something we should probably focus on more. I've also seen some comments in the chat on that topic, so it's probably worth our attention.
Thank you, Philippe. I'll still 1 more minute to go through the replies, and then I'm conscious that we're almost out of time, so I'll be very quick. Yeah, regarding the strategic tools, we have a very clear winner, the reference architecture. So basically everyone deems it very useful to have these overview of all the all the technical building blocks and of which ones would be needed depending on the ambition level, with an average of 5.2. So that's it's a very clear-cut result. But also the tool for the self-assessment of the ambition level and the roadmap management was quite important. And then after that, the catalog of solutions and use cases, which I think also appeared a couple of times, and it was the subject of a lively discussion in the chat. Yeah, the certification framework a little bit at the bottom of the table. Regarding the legal tools, and I think this is very much in line with what we saw earlier, also regarding the technical building blocks, the guidelines for data management, again, deemed quite important by most of you, and also the guidelines for the procurement of local digital twins components, still with an average that is above 3. A little bit lower down the table, tying the guidelines for the generation of privacy preserving synthetic data and the guidelines to involve stakeholders, while the last slot is taken by the playbook. Okay, so again, thank you so much for your contributions. We'll now take a little bit of time, as we said, to analyze in greater detail all of these results, and then we'll keep working to keep designing this toolbox. I now hand it back over to Ines for the final wrap up. Sorry if we stole a little bit of time, but we thought this final analysis was quite interesting, since we didn't have the time to show the results live while we were asking the questions.
Thank you, Carlo. So indeed, I'll be very briefly, actually, and I just want really to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone that participated, because this was a very fruitful meeting for us, and we really expect that you feel the same on your side. So we just started the event highlighting the main objectives and what should be considered for the smart cities and communities in terms of the development of toolbox. Also, we went through the first preliminary results in terms of the building blocks. Also, we exposed what we are having in mind in terms of evaluation of the different scenarios to have a sustainable toolbox deployment, and also went through the main methodology and the main ideas that we have to propose a roadmap. I just wanted to say that we are really grateful for all the comments and for all the feedback that you provided to us. We tried to answer most of the comments during this session. For the topics that we were not able to answer during this event, we will keep them. We'll revise all the feedback that you provide to us, so we'll really take it in consideration. And also, I'm going to share a link where we ask you, if possible, to complete a survey about the session, and also to provide us comments that you might feel that could be relevant and can help us during this journey. So you are able to scan the QR code, and this link will be open for some hours from now on. So if there are any other comments, feedback that you really would like to share with us, we really appreciate. And once more, thank you very much for your participation. It was really incredible, and will help us a lot to tailor and to continue this journey together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now end the recording and the meeting. Thank you.